So I moved here about 8 years ago. I got a small apartment on Maple Street, which is very close to here. And I lived on a second floor apartment. And it required ascending a flight of stairs in order to enter the apartment. And I remember distinctly my parents coming to visit, my father already into the early stages of Alzheimer's, and the extraordinary difficulty with which he tried to climb the stairs. Just to tell you a little bit about my father played varsity tennis in high school. He was an extremely fit man who taught his 4 boys how to play tennis, play softball, frisbee, football, you name it. We were constantly outside, I think mostly because my mother would say, please take the kids outside. And we spent hours playing ping pong and basketball. And in his later years, my father would run 6 miles every day. And so when he came to visit me at my apartment and he couldn't ascend 1 flight of stairs, I simply couldn't believe it. He was physically capable, I know, of climbing those stairs. And I imagine it's happened to those of you who have parents who have gotten older. Just as it happened to me, it's hard to conceive of parents, adults who once were so vibrant, so energetic, so capable, that at some point a switch goes off, or maybe it's a slow deterioration, but that they're no longer able to do that which we had relied upon them to be able to do for so many years. And I see the heads nodding. Maybe it's because you've experienced it in your own life, or maybe it's because you are currently experiencing it. Maybe it's with a parent, but it might also be with you. I know how hard it is for me to get out of bed in the morning. The other day I woke up, I got out of bed, I felt perfectly fine. I wondered what was wrong. It would be funny if it wasn't true. But we know what it's like to go through life and to be worn down. We know what it's like to go through a period of isolation because we've all lived in COVID, and what it means to reemerge and how difficult a transition it is to getting back to life as normal because we are in so many ways depleted. We're exhausted. And life is hard. Even for those of us who we think ourselves to be completely capable and able, that we believe that we have full agency in our own lives, things get hard. Things wear us down. And we are exhausted. And maybe we're not even at our best. In this morning's Parsha, we meet Abraham for the first time. And there are basically 3 descriptions of Abraham, our ancestor. It begins with a moment in which Abraham is referred to as Kaved Ma'od. He is extremely wealthy. We know nothing about Abraham's childhood from the Torah. From the text of the Hebrew Bible, we know nothing about Abraham's childhood. We meet him as an adult, and he is already successful. He has achieved tremendous wealth. He has acquired cattle and mass possessions. He's grown in many ways. The second description we see of Abraham is that he has an extraordinary strategic mind. When confronted by kings warring against each other, he's able to broker a deal. And the third description that we see of Abraham in this morning's Parsha is that he, in fact, has great military prowess himself. Not just a strategic mind, not just wealth, but he was extremely powerful physically as he takes on those who sought to hurt his nephew Lot. 3 descriptions of our ancestor Abraham that I believe we are destined to emulate. A strategic mind, extraordinary capacity to do good, and finally, of course, unbelievable strength. The problem is this morning's Parashat doesn't end there. This morning's Parashat comes to a near conclusion at this verse. It says in chapter 15, verse 1, Achar hadvarim ha'ele hayad devar Adonai el Avraham. After all that had happened in Abraham's life, after all of the trials and tribulations, after all of the exhaustion that he must have been feeling, God turns to Abraham and he says this extremely important word, a word that we say every day, 3 times a day. We heard Clara so beautifully chant it this morning when she led us in the Amidah at the beginning of the service. Al tira Avraham anochi magen. God says to Abraham, don't be afraid. I'm going to be your protector. I'm going to be your shield. The funny thing is, if you look at the story about Abraham up until that moment, he doesn't need any help. The one promise that God had made to Abraham so early on was that I'd make you a great nation. I'm going to bless you and others will bless you. Never once does God say, I'm going to protect you. But the key to that sentence is Achar hadvarim ha'ele, after these things happened. So much had happened in Abraham's life. Famine, kidnapping, war, personal struggles with his wife. And so God says, after all of these things, I can imagine you're worn down. And even you, Abraham, who has extraordinary capacity, you, Abraham, also need some protection. See, that's the story of all of us in our lives. At some point, because of the nature of science, we're going to live to be older than we ever thought we could be. There is a study that recently showed that by the year 2035, please God, I'll make it that long, people will have an increased life expectancy that may top 100. Can you imagine? And that means that there will be a population, and there continues now to be a population that's getting older and it's going to need our help. It's going to need our care. And we'll probably be in that category. So we have to begin now to model for our children what it means to care for our parents so that they'll do the same. We need to figure out in our society how to care for those most vulnerable, those on the periphery who feel most unease. You see, the Parashat teaches us a very simple lesson. Even if you are the most powerful, even if you are the smartest in the room, even if you have amassed the greatest amount of wealth, you're still going to find yourself at some point in your life vulnerable. So learn how to care for those who are most vulnerable. There's no question that there is a rise in anti-Semitism here in the United States. We saw 2 horrific examples this week. One by Kyrie Irving, a basketball player, and one by a gentleman who used to be known as Kanye West. Now he's Ye. Both launch the same attacks that we have heard previously by Louis Farrakhan and others who hate the Jewish people. And we're a small people, but we are powerful. We are small, but we're smart. We are small, but we have made extraordinary contributions to the world. But we are extremely vulnerable. This week in New Jersey, there was a threat on a Jewish institution, on a synagogue. And we did what we do in the Jewish community, and that is we rallied our resources. We have a guard out in front. Can you imagine in America having to have a guard outside a Jewish institution? It seems like Europe in the 40s. We are a vulnerable people. People may say that we control everything, but we do not. The message is simple. Whether it's as a nation or as individuals, we need to learn how to protect each other in order to make the world a safer place for everyone. I remind you, what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. When Hitler went after us as a people, he then went after the gays. And then he went after the gypsies. If we don't learn how to take care of each other, even within our own families, the world is lost. If we don't learn to take care of vulnerable countries that are invaded by superpowers, then our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land don't have a chance. I pray that we find the ability to care for each other. Start with your own family, start with your own parents, start with your own children, and then allow that love, that protection to extend to the rest of the world. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf. Page 184, please rise.